Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 13, Episode 3. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Glad you guys are back with us here on this Monday, Steelers Nation. Dave, Pittsburgh getting back onto the practice field today for 6 straight days, their longest stretch of training camp, and the Pats coming on today, so that really should ramp things up 10 or so different notches. So a lot to talk about Deshaun Watson as well. Dave, how you doing?
Doing good. Happy Monday. And it was interesting to have the day off yesterday there, and really not a lot of, I guess, newsy stuff going on, although the Deebo Samuel contract with the 49ers broke around, yesterday afternoon. That helped give people some things to talk about later into the evening, of course. And then also the word yesterday that the Deshaun Watson decision from Sue Robinson, speculation was it would come out on Monday morning, and I believe it has now at this point. So that gives us a few extra things to talk about this morning, in addition to the Steelers getting back to work at Saint Vincent College in Latrobe, and you'll be back out there again.
Yeah, be back out there, have the recap podcast, special edition of the podcast covering training camp on Monday later on in the day. But Deshaun Watson, the news is in 6-game suspension for Watson. That was the ruling and recommendation by Sue Robinson, the hearing officer in this process. The NFL has the ability to appeal. The NFLPA already said as of last night they would not appeal, and this is probably a quote-unquote lighter sentence than what some thought it might be, compared to a month or two ago. We'll see how the NFL handles things. The 6-game suspension would mean that Watson would not play in the first matchup against Pittsburgh, Week 3, a Thursday night game. Means he would be available, of course, for the Week 18 regular season finale. So the general tone is that this is a lighter suspension, I guess, and Browns fans, from what I can tell, seem to be pretty happy with where things came in.
Yeah,
which is weird to say, I know, but that's just the tone that it's been.
Look, the first 6 games, I have been all over the map on this. I have gone from thinking this might be around 6 games to an indefinite suspension and back again, and then back to the other side again. There was so much speculation going on of what this would and wouldn't be. It had you going all over the place in here. And I did kind of get the feeling late last night when the NFLPA released that statement that they had to know something, right? They had 100%. They had to know which way this was going. For them to release the statement that they did last night really gave one the feeling that it was going to be 8 games or fewer for Deshaun Watson, and that's exactly what it is. Magically, he will be, as things stand right now, he will return for back-to-back division games against the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals. How about that for timing? Obviously miss the week 3 game against the Steelers. There's games against the in week 5 and week 6 against the Chargers and the Patriots. I mean, look, missing him for 6 games is no small, task, for the Browns to overcome, but it sure as heck beats the hell out of losing them for the entire season and that sort of thing. So it's going to be interesting to see how the NFL handles this, right? And even if they do appeal this, if it can, if Roger Goodell winds up lengthening it, I tell you, it's not gonna look great for the NFL in the public perception eye, especially with the female fans, for sure. Mm-hmm. I don't think, and there's a lot of backlash from the whole, other previous incidents concern, when women were involved in those as well too. So I don't know what way this is going to go, but all I do know right now is that 6 games does not feel like it was enough, but that's what Sue Robinson has decided, and now the ball is in the NFL's court.
Right. It felt like it should be more, but from kind of what the tea leaves said whenever the NFL and union argued their case, it sounds like the NFL didn't seem to do the best job overall and maybe had some missteps there. Obviously, that's really hard to know for sure, but that was just some of maybe the reporting and speculation that came out of Pro Football Talk, Mike Florio, and other places. This, of course, is the same number of games that Ben was suspended for. I know everyone remembers the 4 games, but it initially was 6, and then I think got reduced down to 4. So we'll see what the NFL does. They have 3 days to appeal. That appeal would go to either Roger Goodell or someone he designates, another arbitrator in the process. So a lot of reaction today to kick off the Monday. At least there is a final decision, but certainly this feels lighter than what we thought it might be. Although, again, recent reporting seemed to suggest it would be about what it was, 68 games, and ultimately became 6.
Yeah, like I said, I have been from one end to the other of thinking, this might be 8 games. I don't think deep down inside I thought it would ever be like 6 games or fewer. To me, I think I kind of felt like it'd be 8 to a full season. And in fact, there was a point where all those allegations against him were, just seemed to come out every other week. I started to think, man, he'll be lucky not to get a year. And once again, the NFL has spent a lot of time kind of cultivating their female portion of the fan base, and especially ever since I think the whole Ray Rice incident and along those lines there, I don't think this is going to help continue to grow the female fan base right now, especially if it sticks with Deshaun Watson only getting 6 games. Now, some, obviously, I don't know all the facts that go along with this case. I only know what's passed along, through the media and all like that. But it certainly did feel like that, at least, what we know out there, and as far as the allegations and all go like that, it really felt like it should have been more than 8 games, in my opinion. But
right. To me, though, it's about what exactly did the NFL argue and what didn't they argue during that hearing? Because it's like any court case. We can have all the outside facts we want, and we can talk about everything that's available on the internet, but what is actually presented to Sue Robinson? And so I think her brief might have just been released or was about to be released, 15 pages that outlines everything. And so that's ultimately what determines the punishment, is what the NFL argued, what the union argued. I know the NFLPA was trying to say that owners were not being held to the same standard the NFL was trying to hold to Watson. Did that play a factor? I'm not quite sure, but 6 games is the number, and we'll see if the NFL appeals. I don't know if they will. I know Albert Breer believed the NFL would not do so, but given this kind of more light punishment, the NFL may consider trying to appeal this one.
Well, everybody else, if Browns fans are going to, I think, really think that this is too light of based on what we know, obviously, which
right.
We'll see if more hits comes out eventually. It always seems to do that after the fact sometimes. Look, as far as the Steelers, as far as what this means for the Steelers, obviously, Deshaun Watson would miss the week 3 game against the Steelers. If you're concerned about the week 18 game, even if it got to a point where Browns at Steelers in week 18 winds up being meaningful, that's a super great thing if you're a Steelers fan, if as far as I'm concerned. But
sure.
I think the biggest aspect of this, looking at the schedule right now of the Browns, is the fact that magically Deshaun Watson comes back just in time for 2 division games against the Ravens and the Bengals. And so in effect, he would only miss one AFC North game as part of that six game suspension. And that, of course, would be against the Steelers.
Right. I think, again, from the Browns standpoint, it's awkward and, for lack of the better word or phrase, this is a good outcome for Cleveland, personally, just given their structure of the season. So they'll have, I assume, Jacoby Brissett be the starter until Watson returns after that 6-game suspension is up, assuming it stays at that number. So don't have a whole lot more to add personally. The allegations were incredibly serious, very disturbing. You would think it would lead itself to more of a suspension than what he got. But again, it's really about what did the NFL argue. And I know some of the reporting was they only focused on a handful of the women's allegations and just different tactics that didn't just talk about everything that was talked about on the internet. Their approach was, I think, a lot more narrow, and maybe that hurt them. I'm not quite sure, but this is the outcome.
All right. It is the outcome, and anything else that happens after this, we'll discuss as it comes along, but probably don't need to spend much more time on that, on what we are planning to have to be a short show today.
Right. Again, just a reminder, 3 days for the NFL to appeal. So by the time we talk, maybe on Wednesday, we'll find out definitely by the end of the week. All right, Dave, some other Steelers news. Let's actually talk about the big news that happened over the weekend. Steelers announcing their 2022 Hall of Honor. 4 players being inducted into this year's class. Those 4 names are Myron Cope, Sam Davis, Ray Matthews, and Heath Miller. Miller, of course, the most recognized name. Well, Myron Cope and Heath Miller, the most recognized names on that list. Miller was actually in attendance for practice on Saturday whenever he was officially announced as being part of the class of 2022. So really good class overall. I don't know how it took this long for Myron Cope to be into the Hall of Honor. To me, he'd be on that short list of one of the first, 10 names or so to get in, just the icon that he was. Great for Heath Miller. It's got to make you feel, Dave, a little old to see a guy that we both watched. Maybe I probably feel old too, to see Heath Miller, a guy that we watched for his entire career, now going to be in that Steelers part of history.
Yeah, absolutely. But deservedly so. And Heath Miller, the only one of the 4 still alive, at this point. Ray Matthews was an interesting selection, kind of a throwback selection, if you will. Obviously, I was not on this earth for his career. Played in Pittsburgh from 51 to 59, back in the mold of those kind of, wide receiver / running backs / kick returners, if you will. When you talk about a guy like Ray Matthews, I wish there was more tape floating around on him. I mean, there's a little bit of it out there, but obviously not enough as far as that. Now look, Sam Davis, I'm old enough to remember watching Sam Davis play a little bit there. And then obviously Myron Cope, even Steeler fans born, in this day and age are soon given a lesson about Myron Cope and the terrible towel. So, I think they, I don't see how anybody can think that they got this wrong. And it was great to see Heath Miller, who was supposedly headed out of town or something like that, and then got the word a couple of days ago, and then kind of had to change the plans that, we'll just include swinging by Latrobe as part of this and all. So good for him and good for the rest of the class of 2022.
Definitely. I love my old-time Steelers players. So Ray Matthews, who was really versatile back then. Obviously, they when they threw the ball, they threw it deep, and he had some really good, yards per catch numbers. 2-time Pro Bowler overall, did basically everything for that team. The 50 Steelers weren't always that good, but they had some really good players, and Ray Matthews was certainly one of them. Art Rooney had some really nice comments about Sam Davis, calling him one of the most underrated players. Basically of that era, maybe in Steelers history, just being part of that offensive line for all their success in the 70s. Of course, Myron Cope and Heath Miller, everyone knows their contributions. And I loved hearing Mike Tomlin talk about Heath Miller and what he meant, and, joke that, that Heath Miller was a man of no words, not just few words,
right,
but 0 words, and just still had that intensity and got the job done and was just that professional. And so, Very happy to have Heath. And then as soon as Heath walked out, you got the big Heath chants from the crowd, and just a really cool moment on Saturday.
And I think another thing that kind of stuck out about him being at Latrobe and around the facility and all is you get to see the kind of the bond that him and Pat Freiermuth have built since Freiermuth obviously was drafted over a year ago. There, that feels kind of real and genuine there, and Freiermuth obviously, trying to become kind of the next Heath Miller of this organization, and off to a great start in doing just that, as we've talked about, especially in the touchdown department so far as well. So just good overall, and I guess these guys will be celebrated. When is it that they're going to have the game that celebrates?
It should be in the article that was written somewhere. It's sometime in November, I want to say. I'm not seeing the exact date on that, but November something.
All right.
But yeah, Heath Miller and Freiermuth. It was funny. Did you see the clip that the Steelers Twitter account posted of them in the office somewhere meeting each other? Freiermuth, like whenever they after they kind of dabbed each other up, they both stood the same way. They both kind of like leaned back and crossed their arms. It's just like, that's definitely like a Spider-Man meme. And Freiermuth is not Miller's status yet, of course, for many reasons, especially as a blocker. But you just see that shades of it. And to me, it was just cool watching Miller talk to Mike Tomlin and shake Zach Gentry's hand. And then he talks to Danny Smith and John Mitchell, guys that were still with the team way back when Miller played. And to have that continuity where your head coach is the same guy, the special teams coordinator is the same guy. One of the assistant coaches, John Mitchell, is still the same guy. That's pretty cool. You don't get that a lot of places. So I think it's probably really special for Miller to return and have still so many familiar, friendly faces.
Boy, Heath looked like he'd still get out there and maybe give you a few snaps too.
Yeah, Freiermuth wasn't practicing. Lines were kind of short. I think he could have tried.
There you go.
Let me get the actual date on the Hall of Honor, because I do want to make sure that people are aware of when those guys will be officially inducted. I know it is I want to say it is a November game. If I can just maybe find here, November 13th against the Saints will be the weekend that ceremony officially takes place. Okay. So congrats to Myron Cope, Sam Davis, Ray Matthews, and Heath Miller. All right, Dave, what's up?
I said, go ahead. Yep.
Oh, okay. Yep. Let's see. Monday practice today. Pads coming on. So there's been a longer acclimation/ramp-up period than normal. That's the way the NFL is kind of doing things this year. And so typically by now, 4 days in, we've already talked about 2 padded practices. Not the case in 2022, but that'll start changing today. And that really begins the evaluation standpoint. While there are certainly things to learn and glean from during the first 4 days, we talked about that quite a bit. It's still kind of a glorified OTA type of setting. And you kind of felt the energy ramp up on Friday, Saturday. I think guys have been a little anxious, a little ready to get after it here. And so Pat's coming on Monday, and Pittsburgh is pretty famously and well known to be one of the few teams that will still actually hit and go full live contact. Even other teams that might go pads are only doing thud tackling and things like that. So the energy, the excitement, the evaluation, the learning will be kicked up quite a few notches starting today.
Yeah, look, and this is the first of like 6 consecutive practices, right?
Through Saturday.
I mean, this is I don't remember I don't remember them ever going 6 days straight before. Do you?
They have. Yeah, they have. Yeah. 6 has been the max. Usually there's one long stretch that's like 5 or 6 days.
Okay.
And this is it. Yeah.
Okay, then I reckon this is it then. So and it all begins with the pads going on today. Mike Tomlin, in so many words, said you'll be able to feel it when he talked to the media on what was that Saturday there. So definitely an interesting day. And I tell you, if it only makes the defense better, then the offense better look out. You would at least think that it's going to give the offense a better chance to kind of fight back in this, and I think we both agree. And you particular being as how you're the one that's been out there, this has been pretty much all defense through the first 4 practices, right?
It has. And again, you understand the Steelers defense on paper looks better than their offense, but it's not just been the starters or the stars making plays. TJ Watt's been unstoppable, but it's been even guys like Robert Spillane, James Pierre, Chris Steele, guys like that have also been making plays. And just generally speaking, it's been really good, tight coverage. And whenever you're not in pads and, obviously quarterbacks can't get hit, typically that lends itself for the offense to look better. And so defense has really been strong. You would think that would be even better for the defense, as you said, when the pads come on, but we'll see how the offense responds. When pads come on, that the whole tone and energy kind of shifts and changes, and that'll be a really good gauge of like who is the better unit.
All right, and the big story to date, the quarterback depth chart really hasn't changed much of anything. It's been Mitch Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, and then Kenny Pickett. Nothing yet for Chris Oladokun. That's probably not too terribly surprising there. I think this week we're just looking to see if Kenny Pickett can kind of settle his feet a little bit more, right? And string together a couple of nice practices.
Yeah, I think, and I had the stats there from 3 of the 4 practices, and they really reflective.
Lord, stats
I know.
From practice. We're talking about practice, Alex. I've never seen. It seems like every year the media takes issue with things that we do, and boy, they are really hard on you on this whole stats thing to start off. This training camp. Explain to people why you do what you do.
Yeah, well, the people being mad about my stats is nothing new, so it's old hat at this point. I just do that because A, it's something that kind of separates us from the rest of the group, and that's kind of what we're all about here at Steelers Depot. And then B, it provides additional context. It's not just about the eye test stuff. I remember tweeting out these 2 or 3 plays, and that kind of drives the narrative. That kind of really helps shape is the eye test matching with the numbers, or is it not? And we're not beholden to the stats. I'm not going to reference them, all the time and obsess over whoever's stats is what and try to use that as the argument. But it is just one piece of the puzzle to provide some additional context. And Kenny Pickett's a great example of that when you talk about someone that, whenever you watch him, doesn't seem to be driving the football downfield successfully that often. And then you put on the stats and the numbers kind of bear that out, that his longest completion so far is 9 yards, which was a little pop pass to Calvin Austin on kind of a jet motion there. The yards per completion, yards per attempt are really low. And can that change? Sure. I'm sure it will change. It won't be as bad as things look right now, but it kind of shows, whenever you compare his stats versus Rudolph's or Mitch Trubisky's, that those guys are driving the football downfield more often. And you can bear that out from the eye test, and the stats kind of back that up. So just kind of confirmation and context, which is just, good for an additional level of detail this time of year.
All right. And kind of what are the things that you're looking for heading into this first padded practice?
Yeah, I mean, can the offense respond? Can they make some plays? I think he'd learn a lot about the trench play. It's really hard to evaluate, O-line, D-line in non-padded practices because the contact's more limited, and there's no even O-line, D-line drills to go one-on-one. They don't do that until they are in pads. And so there's a great opportunity to learn more about the lines, and there's a lot of questions about the lines, the offensive line in particular. The run sessions overall are going to be a lot more intense, a lot more physical. So excited for that. You just got a little bit more competition. You get some of the one-on-ones, receiver DBs, you get backs on backers. So the individual competition really ramps up. It's not just about the teamwork. You're going to get those one-on-one type, competition periods that really set the energy at a high level.
All right. And, what are some of the things that, you think you're expected to see in these next 5 days?
Oh man, I never know what to expect. I mean, each day can be different. So I never really try to go in with too much of an expectation. Can Kenny Pickett with a day off after his first week kind of reset, be able to push the ball downfield a bit more, get the ball out of his hand a little bit quicker. That'll be interesting there. Can George Pickens continue his success? I think it's been a really strong start for George Pickens, but it is still just a start, and it's a little different feel and tone when it's padless versus padded type practices. So that's someone that I'll be watching for very closely to see how he looks again, especially in some of those one-on-one receiver DB type stuff. That's the guy that could make some big plays there.
We don't want to go too deep into kind of recapping, the first 4 practices, because that's what the nightly podcasts are for. And in the past, I think we've kind of spent too much time on subsequent podcast of regurgitating everything that we said in those nightly podcasts. So I don't want to go too deep into that, but it's probably a good time though for those people that don't get maybe a time to listen to all those nightly recaps of reviewing where this team is from a health standpoint right now.
For sure. Pretty good so far, knock on wood. And obviously when the pads come on, typically the injuries tend to mount as well. I also have a video this morning that kind of recaps the first 4 days separately. So people want to kind of a 10-minute quick fix on the first 4 days. They can listen to that. From an injury standpoint, Miles Killebrew with a pec, Pat Frymuth with a hamstring, Marcus Allen with a hamstring, Connor Hayward with a right ankle. For Allen and Hayward, those things happen on Saturday. So we'll see how much the off day help them. We'll see if Larry Ogunjobi can work in team, if that begins today or not. We'll see about Minkah Fitzpatrick, if he could potentially come off NFI. He was making progress, it seems like, over the last couple of days. Tyson Alualu still on PUP. And I think that's the list. I might be missing someone. Chase Claypool also with the shoulder there. We'll see if he comes back.
Yeah, we would hope, at least keep our fingers crossed that a couple of these guys that have been dinged up lately might be able to get back underway.
They all seem minor. I mean, Killebrew might be the most severe, but they all seem pretty minor overall.
Yeah, I would agree there. And the fact that Claypool was out there and didn't have a wrap on or anything like that is probably good news as far as he's concerned. I mean, we'll see if there's been enough time for him to get back on the field by today or not, and kind of take it from there. But overall, I mean, there's been no injury-related roster moves or anything like that going into the fifth day of practices here. So that's overall a good sign. And you are going to get those soft tissue hamstring kind of guys show up. But I mean, I think overall, if you're a fan of this team, you got to be kind of thankful where this team is from a health standpoint. And you had reported that how Minkah had graduated up to footballs from tennis ball, so it feels like it's only a matter of time with him. Steelers.com did you finally see that video of Larry Ogunjobi that the Steelers had put out on their Twitter machine of him kind of going through some drills there? I think you had said that you hadn't seen it yet, but anyway,
no, it was him going through the individual drills,
doing some footwork kind of stuff and all like that, and just watching that in the context in and of itself really made me feel a lot better where he's at in this process. Look, I mean, it was already good news that he didn't start off camp on the active PUP list, but to see him at least going through that one drilled footwork drill and all like that really up my optimism more where it's at and where he is in his development. The big thing is just don't overdo it with him at this point, and they should be fine when it comes to him.
Yeah, he looks good. I mean, it looks like they're just being very cautious with him early on, and they're just not pushing him too hard, as you mentioned. That's what Mike Tomlin said initially. So the guy's moved around fine. He's gone through all the individual work. He'll eventually work in teams, so it all seems good there. Speaking of the lack of roster, we should also mention the Steelers worked out 4 players over the weekend, essentially. The most notable name on that list is running back Jordan Howard, longtime veteran of both the Chicago Bears and the Philadelphia Eagles, also working out Josh Adams and a couple of defensive linemen. So getting that short list ready, perhaps. Nobody seems to have signed, but Jordan Howard, the most notable name to talk about.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, though, nobody has been signed from that list yet there. So, and the closer we get to, let's see, I guess it's 9:45. Usually on days of camp anyway, they hold off on announcing those things until right when the players are walking out generally, right? In fact, you in the past have said there's a new number so-and-so out here. So we'll obviously have to wait until later in the day to see if they're going to make a transaction on this day or not here. But the big news is I guess with obviously with the pads going on this week, and then 5 or 6 consecutive practices?
6, Monday through Saturday.
And then included in that is the Friday Night Lights practice at Latrobe Memorial Stadium there on August the 5th. So moving toward that. And then obviously Saturday practice will follow that, and then they'll be off again on Sunday.
Right. And I'm not sure if there's a limit to how many padded practices you can have in a row. I believe there is. I have to look that stuff back up, but I imagine not all 6 of these practices will be padded, but the majority of them will be. And that really makes camp a lot of fun.
How many people were out there Saturday? I mean, I know there was talk that like 17,000 tickets were distributed and that kind of stuff. Now, surely there wasn't 17,000 out there, but do you have a good sense about how many people were actually out there on Saturday?
I mean, it wasn't 17,000, but it's probably like 10, 12,000 people. It had like a Friday Night Lights. I mean, Friday Night Lights usually brings out around 10 to 12,000. And so that probably had a similar feel. It was pretty jam-packed on Saturday. Definitely the biggest crowd by far. And good weather, first weekend practice, so it makes sense. But it was rocking at SVC.
All right, you and I will be back again to recap what you observe on Monday, later on Monday night there, and we'll have that special edition Terrible Podcast up as soon as possible. What else do we have to talk about?
Another receiver getting paid, not named Deontay Johnson, Deebo Samuel, after threatening a trade earlier this offseason. They've been able to mend fences at the tune of 23 point something million per year, 3 year, $70 something million deal total. And you read about that last night. The latest receiver to be in that $20 million club, and Deontay Johnson trying to get into the club right now. And so he's kind of last man standing in terms of receivers waiting to get paid. And so that'll be the talk for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, look, another $20 million club. I haven't seen any more spot. I don't think the fully guaranteed is going to turn out to be $58.1 million with Deebo Samuel here. I think what that number is going to end up being is the guarantee. The guarantee that includes injury guarantees and skill and that kind of language stuff there. It is going to be interesting to see what indeed the full guaranteed amount is, especially coming off of the DK Metcalf deal, because that deal, the only thing now there are obviously other guarantees in that, but not fully guaranteed. The only fully guaranteed money in the DK Metcalf deal was the I think $31 million in total, of $30 million signing bonus and a $1 million base salary in 2022. And I would imagine that this Deebo Samuel contract is going to be right around the same as far as guaranteed money amount goes. Now, look, we get it. A lot of you listening to this, podcast, and a lot of Steelers fans just in general don't think the Steelers should pay Deontay Johnson $20 million or more, yada, yada, yada. We get that, but our job is to not have once or, our job is kind of look at it at both sides of this. And I've got to admit, Alex, kind of looking at the way these last couple of contracts have gone with Metcalf and Deebo Samuel, and then, comparing statistically and all, I'm not so sure Deontay should reach that $23 million kind of per year mark that you're seeing, these last couple of guys get here. However, personally, and this will get me some Rotten Tomatoes thrown at me and probably some nasty emails. I think if they could get Deontay Johnson, and we talked about $40 million as being kind of fully guaranteed a couple of shows ago. Looking at these last couple of deals, I don't even think it would take $40 million, quote unquote, fully guaranteed to get a deal done with Johnson. I think you could look at these couple of deals that DK Metcalf and Deebo Samuel signed, and I'm going to assume once again that the Deebo Samuel guaranteed money is going to be probably closer to 30 million than it is 40 million. But looking at those deals, I think that if the Steelers could get Deontay Johnson on say a 3 additional years, 3-year extension at $20 to $21 million per year in new money average, with only the 2022 money fully guaranteed, meaning signing bonus and salary and any roster bonus. That money would probably equate to somewhere around $27 million or so. If you could get it, $30 million or less in fully guaranteed money and a new money average of 20 to 21.5 million, I think that's a deal that the Steelers should explore trying to get done with Deontay Johnson. Now, whether or not his side would agree to it all, it takes two to tango there. And I realize me saying that's not going to be very popular, but I don't think Deontay Johnson gets enough run as one of the top wide receivers in the league. Yeah, the drops are very discouraging and all. Yeah, his average yards per reception isn't up there as far as these other guys are, but how much of that is his fault? With the uber short passing game this team has had last 2 years. And he had to play his rookie season with the likes of Mason Rudolph and Devlin Hodges, right? So whether or not that will happen, I don't know. I still think, though, that people are just kind of brushing this off, saying, the Steelers aren't going to do it. I think there is a level of plausibility that they could potentially look. They could get it done from a cap standpoint. That's not an issue, as we've said 100 times already. If they need more cap space, they just go to the bank of Watt to get that done. Here's another thing to consider. Let's say they get to this deal with Boswell done, and I think everybody listening to this show right now is probably under the impression that at some point between now and week 1, they're going to get Boswell signed to an extension. After that, who else? And obviously they've gotten Minka paid and Watt paid a year ago. Who else are they likely to sign to a big money deal? And by big money deal, let's say top 15 at the player's position in average yearly value. So to pay a player, who is the next player most likely to get paid that lands in the top 15 of average yearly value, assuming they don't get Deontay Johnson paid this summer?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure of a name. There's no obvious one that comes to mind the way it was, TJ Watt last year, Minka Fitzpatrick this year, even Chris Boswell relative to that kicker position. I mean, an Alex Highsmith, a Chase Claypool if he has an amazing 2022 season, but I'm not seeing that obvious name there.
Right. And people have thrown out Pat Freiermuth. Well, look, a Pat Freiermuth deal, the earliest it could happen is after his 3rd season. So that would be 2024. And people are saying, well, George Pickens, the earliest that could happen is 2025. There's no franchise quarterback deal on the horizon anytime soon, right? 2025 would be the earliest for that as well.
And that's because by CBA rule, you have to wait at least 3 years for an extension to happen. Right.
CBA, these players got to play 3 years before they can get a new deal done. So, where are you going to spend your money? And there are cash levels that this team has to spend to of the cap, and the cap's fixing to probably skyrocket, take another, kind of significant jump here in the next couple of years as well, too. So I don't know. Maybe the Steelers have to look at this too, as there might not be another player that we need to pay. And these, you would have hoped that Devin Bush would have been in that category, but he's not now,
Right. But I would say, it's not about I get there's no other players to pay, but it's just, is Deontay worth it or not? That's the question that ultimately matters. Is he worth the money? And even if you're not paying other guys, if he's not worth it, then you're not going to pay him just because there's no one else to pay.
Right. But you have seen teams get into those situations though before, because they haven't had enough stars to pay.
Yeah, I don't know if Pittsburgh would be in that camp, but I think obviously Deontay is worth a big deal. It's really just more about the structure, and is it worth maybe about what everyone else is getting because of that receiver market taking up. There was some interesting commentary, and I want to get your thoughts on that. Some people suggesting that a deal will happen. I know Jordan Schultz did that, and he's flip a coin in terms of how accurate that may be. But even Mike Pursuta had a tweet. It wasn't a report, but seemed to imply that he thinks an extension will be reached before summer's end.
Yeah. I don't know about the first one, Jordan, that you mentioned there, but I mean a lot. Jordan Schultz is, I guess, sort of being treated more and more like a insider these days.
I mean, he has broken stories. Yeah. He's also been wrong on stuff. So like I said, it's like
right.
50-50 on him, but I do want to put that out there. But Pursuta, he said something like, I have a feeling he'll be putting pen to paper soon. Not a report, but that caught my attention.
Well, look, as I've said, I don't know my gut all along has said that it won't happen, but, my gut and what I think, now sometimes in the past it's been my gut and the books say that this won't happen, but now you're dealing with the situation here where this team has cap space. We just took the look ahead at potential players that they, when the next big deal might come along. And we now have seen how many wide receivers do we have examples of deals to go off of now this offseason here. I mean, we have a pretty good, I guess, target range of if Deontay was to get a deal done, what it potentially would look like at this point. And I do think there is a level of plausibility to thinking that it could potentially get done. Now, once again, my gut all along has been kind of, I don't think it's going to happen, but it doesn't mean that it certainly can't happen. And especially if it happened in that $20 to $21 million range. In other words, if Deontay was willing to be kind of the next tick down from Metcalf and Deebo Samuel, I think that increases the probability that a deal could get done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like I said, every receiver who could be paid has been paid except for Deontay Johnson. So the entire market has been fleshed out. We know exactly where everyone stands and where Deontay Johnson could fit in that based on negotiations if a deal were to get done. So it's Johnson, last man standing. And will it happen? I'm very much on the fence about that. Some of the more recent reportings making me wonder what they may know. Omar Khan talked about wanting to keep good players, and Johnson's certainly a very good player. So we'll see. But yet to hear much about any actual talks between the two sides. It feels like it's just been they haven't really spoken yet, but things can certainly speed up, as Andrew Brandt would say, deadlines for action.
And Mike Tomlin does to some. Do you think deep down inside, Mike Tomlin thought there was a chance that Deontay would quote unquote hold in? It didn't sound like it in that first press conference, but I don't know. Do you think he's a bit miffed by this?
Not really. I don't think he spends much time thinking about it. I think I'm sure he understands it. It's happened before. I don't think he spends much time. I think he truly, whenever he says, I'm just focusing on the guys who are working, like that's been his mentality. He seemed like he's had some on the field, some good conversations with Deontay Johnson, some laughs and stuff with him. So I don't think there's any sort of a grudge or any sort of issue there. I just think, generally speaking, Tomlin's MO is that I'm not going to spend my energy on that. It's out of my control. So I'm going to focus on the guys who are working right now.
All right, Deontay Johnson, $21 million per, $28 million combined signing bonus and base salary in 2022, 3-year extension. Do you do it?
Hey, run those numbers by me one more time.
$21 million per. In other words, his new money average would be $21 million a year. His combined signing bonus, the only guaranteed amount, $28 million total, and that's made up of signing bonus and first year salary, and that's the only fully guaranteed portion of the deal. Do you do the deal?
Yes, I do.
I do as well.
It's really easy. It becomes 2 years fully guaranteed. Will the team do that? That would be to me the big question.
Right. And I think that's where he's going to have a little bit of problem because Minkah, the Steelers can still draw the line and say Minkah and TJ Watt were first team all pros and Deontay will say, well, I'm an all pro too. Yeah, but not as a wide receiver, you know.
Right.
But I think if the Steelers if Deontay would agree to just the first year money, the signing bonus and the base salary be the only guaranteed portion of the deal and was willing to do it for around $21 million or per less, I think there's a chance, you know, that this could get done. I would look at signing him for that. Now, I know a lot of people will get angry for me saying that, but I would sign him for that.
Yeah, we'll see. I really don't know which way this thing's going to go. I guess I wouldn't be surprised by anything, which is kind of my cop-out. Maybe I'm leaning still towards 55% it does get done. But I think if it does get done, it's not going to happen until late this month and probably more early September.
Man, you got to feel for him seeing all these deals that he has sat and watched go by this off season. And here he is set to not even earn $3 million this year, you know?
Yeah.
I know people say, well, I don't feel for him. You know, $3 million is $3 million, but man, it seems like it has been everybody and their brothers got paid, but him. And, you know, the Steelers as part of the negotiation with him will hang that franchise tag over his head. And, you know, right now, I think that number, at least estimated by over the cap, it being just under $20 million. And, you know, as part of the negotiation here, the Steelers can say, look, you know, like it or not, we can have control of you for let's call it $23 million total, you know, or let's say the tag ends up going up a little bit more for $24 million. We have you for the next 2 years anyway, you know. Mm-hmm. And then Deontay saying, well, I'm not, you know, but then you want to keep the player happy too, and not just look, we are just playing by the rules that we're allowed to play by. That doesn't do any good for making a player happy. But you can bet that Deontay's agent knows all about the Steelers could potentially be able to use the franchise tag on Deontay, you know, next March.
Yeah, right. That is going to be the ultimate leverage that Pittsburgh has, and I'm sure they're going to be using that in the negotiation. So where that takes things, I'm not sure, but that is probably a reason why this, if it does happen, or any negotiations could take time as each side goes back and forth. TJ Watt, it took until, you know, very late in the process, and that was kind of a slam dunk. This deal will happen kind of situation. So obviously, this deal could take some time as well.
All right, what else we got?
I think it's about it, Dave. Anything any players have said here recently? Peter King doing his trek to Saint Vincent, talking with Mitch Trubisky, speaking with TJ Watt, but really not a whole lot new from either of those guys. Yeah, just Peter King kind of reporting that, you know, kind of thinks that it's Mitch Trubisky's job to lose. And that's kind of what we've said right from the get-go as well. There, you know, not anything earth-shattering has come out on some of these camp. You know, NFL.com. Judy Batista, I think, was there last week at camp and all like that. I tell you where we're going to get the good interviews, Alex, and for those people listening and readers of SteelersDepot.com. Friday, the Friday Night Lights, you know, the serious Pat Kerwin and Jim Miller from Moving the Chains usually show up at Latrobe or, you know, the Friday Night Lights practice. And there's usually a rapid fire succession of like 7, you know, interviews that are generally some of the best ones, I think, that come out of camp, to be quite honest with you, Alex. And we will be turning. Alex will obviously be at Latrobe Stadium for that and all like that. But the rest of us here sitting in front of the Twitter machines will be monitoring that. And we hope to have those interviews turn around
for you readers, as soon as possible. So that is something to look forward to later on in the week. Is are several of those interviews to come out, on Sirius on Moving the Chains.
Yeah, those guys do an excellent job. We're always excited for their interviews because even the Peter King stuff, like I learned nothing from that. You spend a whole day at camp and we learn almost nothing. Tomlin said, not the non-losing season, bring it on. Trubisky said, I'm battling. TJ Watt said, we got to get better. Like, that's fine, but it's not new and interesting. And Curran and Miller always do a good job of asking unique questions and talking to different people, and, always look forward to their interviews.
Real quick before we get to the readers' questions here, what Peter King said in one of his questions just, to me, didn't, at least it stuck out and it didn't sit right to me. Let me see if I can read off verbatim what he had said. Almost kind of saying that the fact that TJ Watt beat out Aaron Donald for Defensive Player of the Year award was kind of an upset. He says two other things. One, you have been in sort of a battle the last couple of years with Aaron Donald for Defensive Player of the Year, whether you think about that very much or not. But I wonder, do you sometime watch him play and say, holy crap, that guy is good? And to beat him at least 1 year for Defensive Player of the Year, to me, it's almost like the year that Luke Kuechly beat your brother for Defensive Player of the Year.
Okay, weird comment there. I think TJ Watt was more than deserving. He was the front runner. His victory last year was of no surprise. So, unless that's just saying in the sense of like Aaron Donald being the best player in the league but didn't win it, I don't know. I'm not sure. Here
it is verbatim again. He says to beat him. He says, "What do you think about that very much or not? But I wonder, do you sometimes watch him play, him being Aaron Donald, and say, holy crap, that guy is good?" And then King continues. He says, and to beat him at least 1 year for Defensive Player of the Year, to me, it's almost like the year that Luke Kuechly beat your brother for Defensive Player of the Year. You got to think, holy cow, that is one heck of an accomplishment. And then he says, do you ever think about that?
Okay. I mean, I guess it's just in the sense of that you're able to beat out, who was viewed as the best player, defensive player in football, the way that JJ was back then and the way that Aaron Donald is now. But it's a weird way to kind of slight TJ Watt as you ask him about that. I don't know. It's not my favorite question. It's kind of a little,
I don't know.
all over the place.
Maybe I'm reading too much. I have a history of doing that, parsing way too deep sometimes. But
it's just one of those questions where, like, what do you want the guy to say? It's not really a question like I don't know. It's just one of those questions that really doesn't lend itself to a good answer.
I mean, that's the kind of question that you put it in my face, I'm going to say, well, maybe Aaron Donald should consider beating me in accomplishment,
Right.
I don't know, man. I took it as King not choosing his words properly, and it's been several years running now that I haven't had the same level of respect for Peter King that I had that 14-year-old me had. Right. It's just like when you tell TJ Watt like Luke Kuechly beating out JJ, he's like, dude, I don't probably don't remember that happening. Like, what just a weird kind of obscure reference to make to a guy who's just like, I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. Yeah, it came off as awkward to me, I guess. And
yeah,
anyway. If I was TJ Watt, I might have got up.
Right, but Watt gave a very good answer.
He gave
very
him
diplomatic answer.
15-minute damn interview there too. I mean that whole video is like 14 minutes or so, like that.
And was there anything new that we learned? I don't think there was.
Not really. No.
It's a 15-minute interview.
He told the story at the beginning of all that he went through, right. And with the knee injury and all, but it's not like that we didn't know that.
Right.
Already, but I thought it did a good job of kind of resetting that, but it wasn't like it was new info and all. But
right. Anyway,
that guy's a possessed guy. I tell you, the way he's playing so far, maybe they should explore maybe making TJ Watt wear a blindfold or something like that during practices so they can get some work done. Because that guy just it sounds like he's been a monster so far. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Nope, he's been fantastic and even better when the pads come on, I'm sure.
All right, a couple emails and we'll get out of here. Chuck Griffith, Dave, when the Chiefs traded Tyreek Hill, there was talk of the Chiefs getting peak value for him. Is Deontay's market value at its peak right now, all things considered? Number two, if the Steelers do sign Deontay, does that signal anything for Chase Claypool's future with the Steelers? Let's address the second part of this first. And you got to look at players at each player, I think, and not say, well, if they do sign this guy, then that. I think regardless of what happens with Deontay, Chase Claypool, at least right now, it could change, in the 2022 season. I think Chase Claypool would have to do a hell of a lot as both a slot and a Z receiver for me to think that there's a good chance that Chase Claypool will be re-signed to a top 20 average yearly value contract before he hits free agency.
Right. I'm not spending really any time thinking about that right now. I'm just taking it one day. He's got to play well this year. He's got to play extremely well this year for that to become a relevant topic or question, which isn't impossible, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. As far as Deontay's value, I don't really know in terms of when his value would be at the highest. Obviously any team that would trade for him would have to pay him and pay him handsomely. So I don't think it's on the table for Pittsburgh to trade him.
And Chuck too, and there is going to be a lot of that right now. I think we're going to be dominated this week by the Steelers should consider trading Deontay Johnson. I have a feeling that's where the bulk of the talk is going to be this week. If you did trade him, though, remember that you would probably have to allow a team to talk to him and his agent to work out a deal, work out a new contract ahead of a time. Because why would a team want to trade for a guy and then him turn around and be a camp hold-in and really having your hands kind of tied a little bit more because they know that you're stuck with him. You know what I'm saying? So it undoubtedly, if the Steelers were, and I'm not convinced it's going to happen, but if they were interested in trading him, they would have to let teams talk to him and his agent and work out an extension prior to some sort of trade being consummated. And that's just not something that we see the Steelers do a lot of that way.
Right. I just don't see that happening. I'm sure it will get talked about. I know that some people have already floated the idea, just as speculation, not as reporting, but I think either a deal gets done or he plays out his final year in Pittsburgh in terms of that contract.
Now, as far as it peak value right now, I think it's kind of fair to say that this is kind of peak value when it comes to that kind of stuff with Deontay, but whether or not that translates into anything, we'll see.
Yeah, again, I just think it's kind of a non-starter in terms of the trade discussion.
All right, John Weissire writes in from Fort Myers, and this is long. We ain't got time to read all of it. This is about Mason and the way he's being handled and getting plenty of reps so far. He says, to sum it up, he says, my money continues to be strong that Mason will be traded but not released. He said, I'd appreciate your views recognizing it's still early and only prognostication at this point. He says, on a related minor note, during the initial 4 days of camp, I've not heard if anything regarding Kevin Rader, who entered camp presumably as the number 3 or 4, depending on Connor Hayward at tight end. He says, but Jace has seemingly moved up the depth chart with some favorable press and plenty of rep opportunities. Have we favorably moved Jace up? We wrote about him because Mike Tomlin talked about him. I don't think you and I have particularly moved Jace. Jace has got a much tougher road to making the 53 than Kevin Rader does, because Kevin Rader is a better blocker, and Kevin Rader can give you something on special teams. Jace Sternberger are neither of those two things yet, and
right.
there's no sign that he will. I think it's more of an aspect of us riding around Mike Tomlin saying, look, we're Pat Freiermuth not in the lineup right now. That gives guys like Jace an opportunity to kind of show that they can block and maybe do something on special teams here. So John Weisire, I think you're reading kind of way too much into Jace being ahead of Kevin Radar. I personally don't view the depth chart as being that. Alex, do you?
Not really. I had my depth chart article come out this morning on Steelers Depot, and that kind of back end tight end group of Hayward and Rader and Sternberger's a little hard to tell who's running ahead of who because there's so many 2 tight end personnel sets and the rotations and mixing and matching. I think Tomlin mentioned Sternberger because he's one of the newer guys in the sense of hadn't had a full training camp before. Obviously, Connor Hayward, brand new to Pittsburgh, but just saying like somebody that we haven't seen, over the course of maybe a full training camp before get extra opportunities. So I don't think that was Tomlin trying to indicate a depth chart, just using him as an example.
The rest of John's email is trying to tamp down Mason Rudolph. It sounds like John Weisire might have a bet somewhere with somebody, or maybe he's put down Mason a lot that he doesn't want to get hung by his tongue. He says the Steelers is basically saying the story of Mason is still awfully illogical, especially in comparison to Mitch. He's been in the Steelers system for several years in his third. And I guess he's trying to sell this as he's not going to believe that Mason is going to A, be with the team come week 1, or B, be the starter. Look, it's been my thought all along that there was a high probability that Mason, might not be with his team come week 1. But the further that we get along in this right now at this point, I still firmly believe that they're not going to just dump Mason just to dump him. And I think that it would take at least a 5th or 6th round draft pick to pry them away. But that's if they see some progression with Pickett and Oladokin. But the Oladokin's yet to play a snap. And, not saying that Kenny Pickett's probably not going to make progress here throughout the rest of the training camp. You obviously hope that he does. To me, it's seeming less and less likely that Mason is going to be elsewhere come week 1.
Agreed. I really believe Mason Rudolph will be a Pittsburgh Steeler week 1. Now, what role he'll have, I think it'll be more likely number 2 than starter or number 3, but we'll see on that. But I think Mason Rudolph will be in black and gold come the Bengals game.
All right. Let's see if we got time to fit one more in here from Jay Barbati. Is it just me, or did Rudolph not only look like the best quarterback of the 3, but actually look starter quality? Saw a great throw just out of the reach of Pierre, looked in rhythm, consistently found the open man. The guy belongs in the league. Wish he got less late. I don't know what that means. How much of
less hate, I'm guessing, is what he meant to say.
Okay. How much of Mitch and Kenny's underwhelming play is due to learning a new offense? Kenny holds the ball way too long. He says Dave said something about how much that concerned him at Pitt. He goes on to write, he'd have been sacked about 5 times Saturday. Make mistakes, bro, but throw the ball, he says. Last, how much of the play on offense is due to the talent on defense? Mitch and Kenny haven't been lighting it up. The guys weren't exactly wide open. He says, the camp podcasts are my favorite of the year. Thank you for a decade of quality content. Look, it's easy to look at these first four, and people are always trying to make rash, firm, decisions based on 4 days of camp. And you obviously can't do that, especially when 4 days haven't been in pads here. This is a process here. It is, I think it's fair to accept the fact that we're not surprised that the defense has been the better of the 2 units here, as the offense has so many kind of new pieces, moving parts on it as well too. I think it's just too early to pigeonhole any of this right now, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I wouldn't call Trubisky's start underwhelming, I think was the term used. Pickett, that's probably more applicable for. Trubisky's been a little up and down, but I think overall it's been fine, and Rudolph certainly has looked good, but again, I'm not really ready to conclude much of anything other than Pickett's start has been slow, and Trubisky and Rudolph have been, I think, in a pretty close battle in terms of their performance.
I mean, these next 5 or 6 this is kind of where you start separating, right? With the pads coming on. I mean, you're going to get a lot. We're going to have a lot better sense of what this roster is and isn't, especially on the offensive side of football, after Friday Night Lights, right?
Yeah, I think certainly this week overall starts to create separation for the entire group whenever really this becomes a truer evaluation period. Especially I want to see these quarterbacks in these 2-minute drills. Maybe we get one today. I'd love to see one, just to see how these guys kind of run the show in more of a football, truer form environment where it's not run a play, then go back to the huddle and this slow pace kind of thing. I like to have that 2-minute intensity and see if you can really put the ball in the end zone. Really, though, for the quarterbacks, knowing they can't get hit right now, what you do inside a stadium is going to be obviously, even more so in that evaluation and determining who's going to run where. But the overall thought is when the pads come on is when the evaluation really, truly begins.
Yeah, stop trying to judge this thing 4 days into practice here. This is a process, and obviously, I think we should look forward to there being more positive out of Kenny Pickett this week. So hold off on all the stifling narratives and all like that right now, and just let the process be part of the process right now. I'm trying to take in as much info as and look, I can't wait for the first preseason game, because that's usually when I start trying to say, okay, this is that, this belongs in that box right there. So, people want to make rash judgments, and it never fails this time of year. All right, Alex, anything else to add before we pack up your lunch and cut the crust off the sandwiches? And
you remembered. Thank you.
And send you off to Latrobe?
Nope, that's everything. Yeah, really exciting day today. Again, there's going to be so much action happening, so maybe a little bit longer to get the report up and the podcast going, but all well worth it, because today really feels like the first start of actual camp.
All right. We spoiled everybody so far, especially on the site, because we've had these kind of these podcasts and these camp diaries up a little bit early. So please forgive us if it takes a little bit longer to get all this content pushed out later tonight. But we'll get it up as soon as possible. Alex, have a safe trip. I'll talk to you several hours from now. You can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you want to donate or get an ad-free version of the site, go to SteelersDepot.com and look up in that upper right navigational bar. So until tonight, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.